On today's episode, I'll dive into all the key takeaways from yet another loss to the Red Wings, as well as the latest updates on Kevin Korchinski and Lukas Reichel.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome on into another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jack Bushman, also beat writer for Chicago Hockey Now. Go and check me out on X at Jack Bushman too, but make sure to follow my strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey to get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And I also got to let you all know that today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. Go and download the FanDuel app now or visit FanDuel.com today in order to get $300 worth of bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. All right, Blackhawks fans, opening things up on the show here today. Not the preseason home opener that we were looking for last night as the Blackhawks fell 3-1 at the United Center for their second preseason loss in 7 days to the Red Wings. However, it was definitely a better performance than last Tuesday in Detroit at Little Caesars Arena, as the Hawks actually led in a majority of the major categories last night. They outshot Detroit 28-19. They had a 35-23 advantage in scoring chances, an 8-4 edge, and high danger chances in all situations. They just ran into a red-hot goaltender in net for the Red Wings and Cam Talbot. And, sometimes in the game of hockey, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. But the Blackhawks, I thought, definitely deserved a better offensive output on Tuesday. They led, I believe, 2.76 to 1.6 in the expected goals for column as well. But they also were pretty shaky on the defensive side of things, particularly in the opening 30 to 40 minutes of the game. And I just thought overall there were far too many casual plays made at the United Center last night. Let's talk through the Red Wings' 3 goals on the evening. The first one started, by the way, with a turnover by Connor Bedard in the offensive zone. I feel like if I didn't point that out, there would probably be someone in the comment section that would make sure to let me know about it. But I really do think the blame here was on Connor Murphy, a seasoned veteran of the Blackhawks blue line, right? He just has to make better decisions in these circumstances, and play recognition wasn't very good here as he jumped up at the neutral zone to try and win a foot race for a loose puck when, he's not necessarily known for being a quality, high-paced skater or anything. Jumps up into that play, ends up losing the race to that loose puck. The Wings go and poke it behind him, leading to a 3-on-1 rush. And then JT Compher, Northbrook native, who I feel like always scores whenever he's facing against his hometown team. He cashed in on that 3-on-1 rush, put the puck past Knight to put the Red Wings ahead 1-0. That's just a veteran play that we cannot have from Connor Murphy, and I thought was just a little bit too casual there in the neutral zone when potentially, if he lost that foot race, he has to recognize that's going to lead to an odd man rush the other direction. Second goal for the Red Wings was overall just a bad sequence, in my opinion, in the defensive zone from a group that should be better in these situations. The Oliver Moore, Jason Dickinson, Ilya Mikheyev trio. I know it was their first preseason together as the third line, but still all known for their defensive responsibilities. Oliver Moore plays a quality defensive game as a young man, and I thought all 3 forwards and defensemen, really, it was Ethan Del Mastro and Connor Murphy on the ice once again for the Red Wings' second goal. I'm not really putting it on one sole individual because if you watch the sequence, I feel like the Blackhawks were just kind of all over the place in the defensive zone there. But just something, again, that can't really happen when you have your best defensive forward trio out there on the ice. And Ethan Del Mastro and Connor Murphy both are supposed to be known for their defensive prowess. So clear breakdown there on the Red Wings' second goal. Dylan Larkin sets up Michael Branzag-Nygaard all alone in the most dangerous area of the ice, aka the slot. Way too many hyphenated names, by the way, for the Red Wings last night. Jacob Bernard Docker, Michael Branzag-Nygaard, Axel Sandin Pelika, who, by the way, ASP. Man, I think the Red Wings have something special with this kid. He made a few real standout plays last night, but MBN was the one who cashed in to double the Red Wings lead in the first period. And then the third and final goal on the evening for the Red Wings, again, I thought was just way too casual of a play for Sam Renzel. And honestly, when the puck was on his stick tonight, I thought he was just way too casual overall, but just needs better play recognition here to recognize that Berggren, I think it was Jonathan Berggren, who was coming out of the box with a full head of steam. Rinzel just, probably is used to being able, with his 6'4" frame and the way he skates, to just kind of be able to get around those types of guys. Well, the National League is a different beast, and Sam Rinzel kind of found that out the hard way on the Red Wings' third goal. Also, don't think it was a very good back check by Teuvo Teravainen. If he really hustled and wasn't just kind of watching what was developing in front of him, I think he could have chased down Lucas Raymond or at least tied up his stick. But the fault is still with Sam Rinzel. That was a brutal turnover right at the end of the Blackhawks power play that basically gave Detroit the win, as it was going to be very complicated for the Hawks to claw their way back from a 3-0 deficit. And altogether, the Blackhawks man advantage. They had 6 power play chances in this game, unable to convert on any of them. 15 actually of the 35 scoring chances 16 I think it was actually, of the 35 scoring chances that they had on the night in all situations came on the man advantage. The top unit of Bedard, Bertuzzi, Nazar, Teravainen, and Rinzel. I thought they started the night real slow, but definitely got better and moved the puck, had an improved puck movement in the offensive zone as the game progressed, but still, unfortunately, didn't get the finished product and managed to get one behind Cam Talbot. But I do still think, because of the amount of chances that this top power play unit generated, I think there are better things to come for that unit. However, they do need to clean things up in terms of the amount of shorthanded opportunities that they allowed last night as well. I think it was at the very least 2, and it might have even been 4, legitimate chances that the Red Wings had when they were down a man. And this was something that kind of plagued this young Blackhawks team last year. Obviously, Sam Rinzel going to step up in that top power play quarterback role in replacement of Seth Jones, another young player out there for the Blackhawks. They just got to have better recognition of where their shots are coming from, and not allowing so many odd man rushes when they have the man advantage. Definitely something they got to tidy up before the regular season begins here in just 6 days. But before I move on into segment 2, do want to talk about some players of note from last night's home preseason opener, both good and bad. Got to start with Colton Dach, man, who just continues to be on a tear here in the preseason. Wound up converting, cashing in for the lone goal of the evening for the Blackhawks last night, his first tuck of the preseason, and it was the exact type of play you want to see from a power forward in this league. Driving to the net, utilizing that big size of his. Also, some really good edge work displayed by Colton Dach, and then showing off the good hands with a nifty finish to finally get one past Cam Talbot. That got the Blackhawks on the board in the third period. But in addition to that, Dach drew a penalty in this game, had a great feed to Ryan Green all alone in front that somehow he wasn't able to put home. But I thought Dach was noticeable basically on every shift that he had last night. Wound up finishing with 4 shots on goal and added 5 hits in only 13 minutes and 37 seconds of ice time while he was playing down on the fourth line with Nick Foligno and Ryan Green. Those 3 players were actually atop the Blackhawks chart in terms of the game score impact card. So thought it was a really good bounce back performance from Nick Foligno, who wasn't very good in the last preseason game on Sunday. He definitely performed better, but Colton Dach was probably the one leading the charge the most for the Blackhawks in this game. And if he hadn't done so already, he officially cemented his NHL roster spot with this performance against the Red Wings. Really expect him to be a physical forward for the Blackhawks down on their fourth line, and he showed us some of his improved offensive game for the first time here in the preseason last night. Lots of good stuff from Colton Dach. Connor Bedard, thought it was another noticeable night from Bedard, which is what you want from him. He's been noticeable in every single preseason game thus far, and if he can do that on a regularity in the regular season, good things are going to happen for this kid. Had 5 shots on goal last night. One thing that I've noticed about Bedard so far in the preseason, he's been taking a lot more one-timers, and I absolutely love that because he has a blistering shot. And, we saw it in his first 2 NHL seasons, not all that effectively for the most part, but I feel like he's taken that to another level with his summer training, and he absolutely clapped one on a feed from, I think it might have been from Bertuzzi when he was out there in the middle of a shift with Bedard. Regardless, Bedard absolutely hammered this one-timer, but Cam Talbot was able to get a glove on it. But I just think the improved one-timer, the shot looks as strong as it's ever been. I think in addition to the increase in speed, it's just another reason to believe that Connor Bedard is going to have his best NHL season thus far. At the same point in time, though, there were some struggles out of Bedard last night as well. And I thought out of his 3 preseason games that he's played now, this was definitely the one where he tried to do a little bit too much in my mind. And I do wonder if it's, because he's a 20-year-old kid back at the United Center for the first time, wants to get the crowd on their feet. The Blackhawks were also trailing by a couple of goals for a majority of this contest. So I understand Bedard kind of playing with a little bit more desperation than we've seen thus far. But I think at some point, it's almost like the saying in golf, the harder you try, sometimes the worse things go for you. And I just kind of thought Bedard was trying to do a little bit too much last night. Was on the ice for 2 of the Red Wings' 3 goals against. Also went 0 for 4 at the faceoff dot after getting off to a pretty good start at the dot in his first 2 preseason contests. Hopefully he'll be able to bounce back in that department and wind up on the stat sheet in one of the 2 Blackhawks preseason games this weekend. Next, Ethan Del Mastro. Still was not the night that EDM needed, in my opinion. He was -2, did record a secondary assist on Colton Dach's goal, but altogether, I just thought he, again, failed to secure his NHL roster spot. And the Blackhawks have given him all the opportunities in the world to cement himself as that third pairing left-handed defenseman, but still feels like the near future is pretty unknown at this point for Del Mastro. He's, of course, still waivers exempt, so he could be going back down to the Rockford IceHogs if the Blackhawks, think that's where he fits best at this point in time. And considering how well Nolan Allen played in his most recent preseason game, I just can't help but wonder if Allen now has the advantage over Ethan Del Mastro. I really expected EDM to lock up that spot, but Nolan Allen, I just think, has been the better of the 2. So far here in the preseason, Del Mastro will play one of the 2 games over the weekend. He's going to need to tidy up his defensive game in order to prove himself to the coaching staff. Then Matt Grzelcyk, ghost performance from Matt Grzelcyk last night. Didn't really notice him whatsoever. He had a 0.00 expected goals for percentage at even strength last night. That is not how you make an NHL roster. Hawks were also outshot 5-0 and outchanced 4-0 when Matt Grzelcyk was on the ice. Didn't wind up sticking for Sam Rinzel for the entire game after starting on the top defensive pairing. Only wound up playing a little over 13 minutes. Had goose eggs in a majority of the box score categories. Did have, one, was it block shot? I think he had 1 block shot and 1 takeaway in those 13 minutes. Just have not seen enough from Matt Grzelcyk to give him an NHL job. And I know Ethan Del Mastro hasn't proved himself. Kevin Korchinski, as I'll get to here in just a moment, isn't going to be part of the NHL roster. And Jeff Blashill said, if some of these prospects struggle, Grzelcyk could get an NHL contract. But I do think Grzelcyk had to look good himself here in the preseason, and he just hasn't really been noticeable whatsoever in his first 2 games of preseason action. So I think it's really hard pressed at this point that Grzelcyk is going to get an NHL deal, especially when a guy like Nolan Allen, who was a former first-round pick, I know it wasn't under current GM Kyle Davidson, but as a guy who was a first-rounder, who's been on the professional scene for the last 2 years, and just given the vibe of this Blackhawks team, how the young players are the priority, I don't see why they wouldn't go with Nolan Allen over Matt Grzelcyk. Even if they maybe could use another veteran on the back end, I don't think Grzelcyk has been good enough in order to receive that opportunity. Last but certainly not least, Andre Burakovsky. I did think he had a better game on the top line along with Bedard. Was not very good in his first preseason action against the Wild. But I do still wonder if the Blackhawks could be thinking about a different trio on that top line. I do think Blashill wants to keep the Teravainen, Nazar, and Bertuzzi trio together. I can't help but wonder, though, someone like Oliver Moore, whose speed is just so obvious out there, and because of that, could potentially play well at a high pace with Connor Bedard. I wonder if Blashill is considering giving Moore an opportunity there up inside the top 6 during one of these final 2 preseason games, and then maybe bumping Andre Burakovsky down to the third line, even though he's not necessarily a The Blackhawks probably want him more so for his offense on this roster makeup. He has been a third liner for the Colorado Avalanche and the Washington Capitals. Apologize for digging into my eye here, Blackhawks fans. I got like a eyelash or something in there. Burakovsky could still be a third liner here for Chicago. He has been in that role in the past, obviously on better teams, but I just think, it hasn't gone maybe as well as Blashill had hoped. Obviously, it's only the preseason, and they've only had 2 games of action together, right? Pretty small sample size, but hey, just thinking out loud here, basically. Oliver Moore and his pace. He's had a good preseason, had a good training camp. I know he's more of a checking line, two-way player type of guy, but with those wheels, could be intriguing along with Bedard on the top line. There are all my key takeaways from the Blackhawks. 3-1 loss to the Red Wings last night at the UC. Hopefully they'll bounce back and get that first home preseason win on Friday when they face off against the Minnesota Wild. Coming up in just a moment, Blackhawks fans, don't go anywhere because I still got to break down Kevin Korchinski getting sent back to the AHL. But first, I got to talk to you all real quick about Monarch Money. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's where Monarch Money comes in, though, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one super clean, easy-to-use interface, both available on your phone and your laptop. And Monarch does all of the heavy lifting for you, so that you can link all of your accounts in minutes and see clear data visuals without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks any longer. Go and use our promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps, and you'll get half off on your first year. Again, that's 50% off on your first year at monarchmoney.com with our promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps. Before I get into segment 2, just a reminder to please go in, smash that like button, and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. If you haven't done so already, I greatly appreciate all of your support. But segment 2, even though there are still 2 more preseason games to go down this weekend, Blackhawks fans, the team has apparently already seen enough to know that Kevin Korchinski is going to need more seasoning in the AHL, as KK was sent back down to the Rockford IceHogs on Tuesday morning. That trims the Blackhawks training camp roster now down to 29 players. Definitely a disappointing up here for Korchinski, given that, he was the 7th overall pick in 4 NHL drafts ago now at this point in time, and still hasn't landed a full-time NHL gig. But this also shouldn't be that surprising of a that was awful. This shouldn't be that surprising of a development at the same point in time, Blackhawks fans, because all throughout, going into the start of training camp, throughout the last couple of weeks of summer, when I was projecting this Blackhawks blue line, it was going to be very, very difficult for Kevin Korchinski to wind up making this team. Now, I also didn't expect Ethan Del Mastro to struggle the way that he has. Matt Grzelcyk hasn't looked very good as well. Nolan Allen, while he did look, pretty darn solid on Sunday, it hasn't been a absolutely standout training camp for him or anything. Maybe with a couple of real standout showings from Korchinski, maybe things could have been different here, but I still feel like this was always the most likely situation just because of the Blackhawks' defensive depth, the size that they have on the back end, and a couple of those players who are older than Korchinski, right? Nolan Allen, a part of the 2021 draft class. Same with Ethan Del Mastro. Even though Korchinski has been on the professional scene just as long as those guys, he is still a year younger than them. He just turned 21 years old this past summer. And quite honestly, in hindsight, the Blackhawks probably wasted a year of his development by rushing him along to the professional scene. I think that was, we can say now, the wrong decision for Korchinski because he wasn't AHL eligible for that year. The Hawks just threw him into the fire at the NHL level and kind of a top 4 role on one of the worst teams in hockey. As an undersized offensive-minded defenseman, that was always going to be a really tough position for Korchinski to be in. So I don't really think that was an optimal decision by the Blackhawks. However, I'm sure they wanted to, give him that opportunity to thrive right from the get-go and get those good experiences at a young age. But given my time covering the Blackhawks here, it's just become pretty obvious that undersized offensive-minded defensemen are really going to struggle on bad teams who are hemmed in their own end for a majority of these games. And that's kind of what's been going on with Kevin Korchinski here. Don't get me wrong, Blackhawks fans. As a guy who was a 7th overall pick in 2022, you expect him to be part of the NHL group and you expect him to be making an impact. But I still just don't think we should be jumping to conclusions at this point with Korchinski, because this isn't the end of the road. This isn't the end of his time here in Chicago. We still don't know what he's officially going to be, but make no mistake about it, he doesn't have that, same luster or upside that he was once credited with when he was 18, 19 years old and thought of as potentially a top pairing puck moving defenseman. I don't think that's in the cards for Korchinski anymore, but I do still think he can be an effective, maybe number 3 or number 4 defenseman. It's just all going to depend on how well he develops here this season and over the next summer. This is really a crucial next 365 days for Kevin Korchinski, because guess what? He's still young enough where, yes, it's frustrating, as I've been outspoken about, but you can kind of let him continue to develop. But if this carries on into the 26-27 training camp and preseason, Kevin Korchinski is going to go from prospect to suspect, and it's going to kind of start feeling like the Lukas Reichel situation. I think that's, again, why a lot of Blackhawks fans, I should say, have kind of counted out Korchinski already, because they see him going along the same path as Lukas Reichel, and that clearly hasn't worked out here in Chicago yet. But I think it would be a mistake to count out Kevin Korchinski still. I agree, he doesn't have that same luster. He doesn't have that same shine. But the kid's only 21 years old, and this was always the most likely outcome for him given the Blackhawks defensive situation. But tough news, I'm sure, for Korchinski, knowing that he's not going to be part of the Blackhawks NHL roster out of the gate. Jeff Blashill did mention after last night's contest, though, that he will be back for one of the Blackhawks' 2 preseason games over the weekend. Also, definitely wanted to get into an update on Alex Vlasic. Blashill gave us some insight on what exactly happened with Vlasic in Sunday's preseason game against the Wild following yesterday's morning skate, and he confirmed what a lot of us already kind of knew, that Vlasic did get cut by a skate blade early on in the third period of that game. Fortunately, Vlasic was wearing cut-resistant socks, which helped prevent this from being a more serious cut and a more serious injury. He is expected to miss the remainder of the preseason, but should be good to go come October 7th, just 6 days away, when the Blackhawks open up the regular season against the Florida Panthers. And it sounds like Vlasic could even be going to a higher grade, a even more protective sock, because of what happened over the weekend. And some more Blackhawks are probably going to follow suit in that matter, just given the sheer number of skate blade cuts that have been happening in recent years compared to how many there were like 10 or 15 years ago. And then we also got an update on forward Landon Slaggert, who returned to practice on Friday. He's missed a majority of training camp thus far. And as I talked about yesterday, that's kind of put his NHL roster spot in jeopardy. I'm really interested to see how exactly this forward group is going to look against the Florida Panthers, because Slaggert coming into camp seemed likely to be part of the NHL lineup. But with the ascension of Doc, Moore, and Green, kind of up in the air at this point, but sounds like Slaggert, the hope is to get him in one of these games here over the weekend. And like Alex Vlasic, he is expected to be fully healthy come the season opener against the Florida Panthers. There is the latest on Kevin Korchinski, Alex Vlasic, and Landon Slaggert. Coming up in just a moment, Blackhawks fans, the Lukas Reichel trade saga is likely coming to a close. But first, I got to talk to you all about another one of today's sponsors, which is FanDuel. The NFL season is now in full swing, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for every kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. And what I personally love about FanDuel is that it's super quick, it's easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. With player props, same-game parlays, and more ways than ever to get in on the action. Are you ready to play? All you got to do is download the FanDuel app now or visit FanDuel.com today in order to get started. Again, that's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet and win $300 worth of bonus bets when it wins. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just wanted to say thank you to everyone for making the show your very first listen here to start off your day. And for your second listen, go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where there is no offseason, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter the most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. And you can easily find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3. I've been talking about Lukas Reichel trade rumors on the show for seemingly ever, but I think we're finally going to see this whole saga wrapped up in the next 6 days, as Frank Saravalli on Bleacher Report podcast yesterday said the Blackhawks have started making more trade calls involving Reichel in recent days and are actively trying to find Reichel a new landing spot before the start of the 25-26 regular season. And I don't think this should really be surprising at this point in time. I mean, I touched on this on yesterday's show before we got this update from Frank Saravalli. I've talked about how I think selling low on Lukas Reichel isn't the smartest business decision, but it's very obvious that he doesn't have a future here. He's going to be utilized as an extra forward to open up the regular season. Wasn't a part of the Blackhawks lineup last night with a forward group that included what very likely could be the forward group against the Florida Panthers on October 7th. It's obvious the Blackhawks don't see a path for Lukas Reichel at this point in time. He's entering the final year of his current deal and very likely would not be signing if he were to remain a member of the Blackhawks. But Kyle Davidson, wants to do right by his player here and wants to go and give Lukas another opportunity with another club. I know, again, like I just said, business-wise, considering Saravalli reported yesterday that the Blackhawks are not looking at a serious return, it's probably going to be in the form of a mid to late round draft pick. I'm guessing a third or fourth round selection at this point in time. It's, not a business savvy move for the Blackhawks to punt on a former first round pick for that type of return when he's still under contract for like $1.2 million. But again, there's no spot for him here, and Kyle Davidson wants to do right by his players, wants to be giving them an opportunity, doesn't want to block their development or, ruin any chance of them figuring it out in the future. No, as a general manager, yes, you want to do what's best for your team, but you also want to be known as a guy who does what's best for your players as well in these types of situations. So while it will be frustrating to see the Blackhawks probably get I'd probably be happy at this point if they got a third round pick. If they get a fourth for Lukas Reichel, it's not a quality return, but at the end of the day, this is kind of the situation that the Blackhawks are dealing with. Look out for the Edmonton Oilers, by the way. Of course, Stan Bowman drafted Lukas Reichel. Edmonton is always looking for an increase in speed. I would not be surprised. We've seen the Blackhawks and Oilers make trades in the past. Would not be surprised if Lukas Reichel ended up in Edmonton. I've seen the Colorado Avalanche been thrown out there on social media. Maybe the Florida Panthers, who are down a couple of forwards to open up the regular season. But sure seems like Lukas Reichel is going to be on the move, Blackhawks fans. At this point, I'm expecting it to happen before the start of the 2025-2026 regular season. Go and drop down below in the comment section. If this is the end of the road for Reichel, let me know, A, where you think he's going to be dealt, and B, what was your favorite Lukas Reichel moment here as a member of the Chicago Blackhawks. That's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way you can tune in on your way to work, on your way home from work, during your lunch break, whatever it may be. And subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube as well. That way you don't miss any of the latest episodes. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Follow me on X at JackBushman2. My Strictly Blackhawks account is at Talkin' Hockey. Until the next episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your days. I'm going to hit the right button this time, and I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.